Alrighty. All right, whoever is chiming in the beginning, welcome, welcome. I really should start doing this in the top background. All right, live now. Nice, nice. Let's see. Hey, can't see me. What do you mean can't see? Not on my end, it's not. Ron, can you see me? Is the screen frozen? Everything looks good over here. The light is on. Everyone else can see me, buddy. All right, cool. All right. Let me just put the message in the chat. .com. Make sure that link works. Yes, it does. All righty, ladies and germs. So, the only thing I always make a mix up here is which is which as far as the testing procedure. I believe Ron is the compression-based test. So let's kind of get right into it. Ron and Mon. So it's a research octane number and a motor octane number. The tests are done in a comparison to, I believe it's heptane, and I believe on the motor octane number and on the research octane number, that I believe is done on heptane and a 5% mix of another product. If I get those mixed up, please forgive me. I don't know all the ingredients to gasoline. So, and I thank you everybody. Let me just say off the bat, thank you everybody for tuning in right away. That's always awesome. We're also going to go over how that kind of plays a role in tuning, of course, and kind of why like Ron versus Mon can be as far as your fuel selection, because a car can, as fuel can have a decent Ron research octane number, but not a great motor octane number. And this is kind of like we're going to get into a little bit about why that affects cars on nitrous and why you don't see cars ethanol on nitrous for the most part. Like you don't see large amounts of it, not without some sort of leaded-based fuel. So back to those two testing methods. So what's up, Rashawn? So the first method, the Mon, so Ron is compression based. So they take a motor, they put the fuel, and they compare it to heptane. Heptane, I don't know what heptane's considered octane reading is. I think it might be 100. And the put it in a variable compression engine. And they basically squeeze on it until it knocks or detonates. And that's how you get your research octane number. So you're going to see where this goes when it comes down to squeezing. And the Mon, which the motor octane number is done through ignition timing. And you keep advancing ignition timing until it knocks or detonates. So since there are things like nitrous, which is sensitive to ignition timing, this is where your motor octane number may be extra valuable. So this is why if you look at certain fuels, you'll see have a high research octane number, which is compatible, which will work with boost a lot of times, versus a low Mon, and it won't the Mon will be low and it won't work well with nitrous. because nitrous requires you to remove timing. Now, this isn't 100% fact because, well, okay, let me rephrase this. That's not a set in stone thing because you have variables like leaded fuels. When you're dealing with, say, like oxygenation and fuels that require more to equal the same amount of, what's the word I'm looking for? Just, so in perfect example, energy density. There, perfect words, energy density. So 93 oct gas is more energy dense than ethanol. So that cooling property is like a effective octane number. So now we have the RON, MON, and effective octane number. And in the United States, they call it AKI. So they take the RON and the MON, they add them together and divide them by 2, and that gets you your number. The problem with that is that if you don't have both of those numbers for your fuel, well, you're 93 octane. Well, how do you know 93 octane at this gas station has the same research octane, and maybe it has a higher research octane, a lower motor octane number? So this is why you can go to different gas stations and a modified car, the same quote unquote 93 octane, and yet it won't work as well for, maybe you'll go to Circle K and the way theirs is blended is better. Or you'll go to Shell and the way by your area, that's the way it's blended, is better. And we'll get into the over octaning. So any sort of oxygenated fuel works well in any sort of pressurized or high compression motor because it requires more fuel for cooling. So, more fuel to burn, and it creates a cooling effect, which is your effective octane. So with that being said, can you go to the kitchen side a bit more as the camera is dark on the side? Yeah, I understand that. But if I turn the other light on, it's going to glare the snot out of the camera. So it's what I have, and I'm sorry, I don't have like good lighting, my apology. Sorry. Because if I do that, it's going to literally create an instant glare, and I've got nowhere else in this little place that I live in to do this. All I can do is kind of, maybe that's about it. Is Chase in here today right now? I don't think so, but I did, Chase, if you're in here, I got your basket to do. All right. Has anybody, actually curiosity, is anybody in here run Q16? There you are. Yeah, buddy. Got your basket. I want to do real quick, when I send this back, because I don't want this to get damaged, just so you guys know, if you ever take your basket out, this clip here releases this, and it just comes right off. So, sorry. So the clip here releases it, and you put it back on, because I'm going to send it back not attached, because I don't want this to break. Oh, that's getting a little come on. Really? Huh. Yeah, okay, yeah. So when I send this back, guys, and guys who have done this, haven't done this, this little clip right here, squeeze. And when you put it back on, so I don't want to set, because that, when that's attached to the actual basket, that can want to break. Well, hey, I know it's a spare, but it's not mine, and I like to take care of people's stuff better than my own. So has anybody in here ever run Q16 or ever run some sort of race fuel? So that's I want to know, and if so, what scenario have you done it in? Or has anybody here even tried octane boosters? I should have printed out a sheet showing the differences. Actually, I should just bring the specs up, and this would be a perfect example. E85R. I believe R is the leaded. Just give me 1 second because I want to. I don't know what. Oh, Hendrix. Yeah, buddy. I'm going to schedule people tomorrow. Let me see. Spec sheet. So, if you go into X85, which is E85 for your ethanol. So the X85 is a standard ethanol. If you look, the research octane number is 108. So even though we say it's 100 octane, the motor octane number is low, 95. And the reason it works so well, because the research octane number is compression based. So that's why if you get a fuel with the high research octane number, it should do well under boost for the most part. And obviously, again, the variable is, oxygenation. There is in any fuel that requires a lower stoichiometric ratio. I should have thrown that in there, like 9.8 to 1. So for those of you that don't know what stoichiometric ratio is how many parts of air does it take and how many parts of fuel. So in most cases, your standard gas at the pump, like with no ethanol, is 14.7 to 1. 14.7 parts air, 1 part fuel. Now, those who want to try Q16, I do want to mention it's extremely brutal on components if you leave it in the car for any extended period of time. Q16 is definitely one of those fuels. And it's, if I go and look at the construction Q16, I believe it actually is methanol. That is the extra part of the fuel that gives you the oxygenation. So essentially, it's a C16. If I'm not, don't quote me on this. A C16 with oxygenation via methanol. So if you look at Q16, which is a fuel they use a lot for like nitrous and really high compression, the Q16 has a really high motor octane number, which is a tougher test. And the research octane number, there's only a 4-point difference. So Q16 does better for nitrous because of the high motor octane, and that's a test done against ignition timing. And if we go to the SDS sheet, I don't know if they'll still have it because sometimes they remove the SDS sheet. International SDS sheet for the fuel composition. Percentage. No, the tetraethyl lead. Methylpropane. Ethylmethylpropane. No, and then there's, no, actually, maybe it's not methanol, but it's extremely, it can be very corrosive. It actually killed the pump in my surge tank, and the pump that was in my surge tank was not in there that long. I didn't want to run any more because this is to have station with 75 to 85%. Yeah. So, E85R. I'm sorry. Let me go back on that E85R. Let me just see what's in it, and I can kind of give you some direction. Oh, the F85, it's an unleaded. Oh, Sunoco E85R. That's going to be the same thing as like VP X85. If you can get the research octane number and the MON, there we go. Research octane 104, the motor octane 90, it was like 94. So I would say that's probably not quite as good as VP X85, although we could have a little bit of bias on the numbers as far as motor octane number. If my internet connection would go a little bit faster, I'd be able to tell you. But that should be consistent. Just because you buy like X85 though, that doesn't mean that it's actually better than pump. It really depends. So X85 is claiming a significantly higher RON than the E85R from Sunoco. Um, Although it's going to be more consistent, it claimed 104 as your research octane versus VP claims a 108 research octane. Now, if you just want to go and not mess with any of the junk altogether, I honestly say, yeah. Well, the E80, E98 Ignite is good stuff. Or you can just get, if you have a VP dealer near you, X98. It's basically, I used it when I put down, when I made my big 762 pole. The funny thing is, though, the Mon is like sky high because remember what I said about like effective octane? See, the problem with E85 is the effective octane's low because they use just regular gas in the rest of it. Loki, what are you doing? Versus the X98, it's just ethanol. So you theoretically could do better on nitrous on straight X98. But if you look at the research octane number, it's actually lower than E85. So unless I'm getting them reversed, no, it's not reversed. So like I said, there's some give and take on that. Over octaning a motor. Now that we've got a fair amount of people in here, can you over octane a motor? Yes. You could throw more octane at it and nothing happens. And a prime example of that is when you run a really good ethanol. Let's just say you buy C85 and your base fuel is a pure 100 octane instead. You could throw methanol injection on top of something like that, and it's just not going to make any more power. If you do, it'll be so minuscule because you've got so much octane in there in the first place. One prime example is if you go to the dyno and you're running even 40 or 50% ethanol, Boostane is a fantastic octane booster. You can, if you're running 50% ethanol, you can go put 5-6 ounces of Boostane Professional in there and turn the regular 93 you had mixed in there or 91 into like 97 or 98 octane, and you will make no more power because you've got so much octane, it just doesn't matter. I did this when I was at the dyno. I put K16 as my base fuel when I went there the first time. And that's not, it's like Renegade's version of Q16 and it's not as good. And I made 707 and I literally over octaned the motor so that to the point where I actually probably lost power because I had K16 spraying with methanol and the burn rate starts to get so slow. And I could literally put 26 degrees of timing in it or 33, and it showed absolutely no knock and made zero more power, like zero, like not even like 5 horsepower more. I think 28 degrees of timing is what I settled at on it, and it just didn't do anything. It was dead. So my advice to you is let's say you got a lot of these guys are on stock fuel system on E30 and you want to do 100 octane with it. Sure. Motor octane of 98 and a research of 110. That good for a little bit of nitrous. How would that compare to E50 on effective octane? So I need to know what fuel too, because you're giving me research octane and motor octane of 98. Well, on something like that, you could run a 50 shot of nitrous, and the same thing could be said for E50. So a 98 octane with a motor octane is pretty significant, considering if you consider at the pump some of these guys are crazy enough to run a 50 shot of nitrous on 93 octane, and it can be done if you pull enough timing. The octane at the pump on 93 is a mix of MON and RON. So if you take that 110 research octane and you're 98 and you split the difference in the middle, you're at like 105 octane. So there's no reason why you couldn't run a little bit of nitrous on that. It's not that you can't run nitrous on ethanol. It's just you can't run a lot of nitrous. Yeah. What's up, Abe? Sunoco 260 GT. So, let me see. Sunoco. So the biggest thing is with nitrous, you want to, I think it's for about, well, I don't know if it's, remember, for every, on an NA motor, it's for every 100 shot, at least 2 degrees of timing is pulled out. On a turbo motor, that's kind of variable, because if you're running like 30 pounds of boost, you're going to need to pull a lot more than if you double it, even so, on like a 50 shot. You have to be really conservative, and it might just detonate. So, Sunoco 260 GT. Well, what makes more power, E50 or 104 octane? E50. The oxygenation. That's what's going to win. That's, you kind of, and go back to the oxygenation, the effective octane of 50% ethanol is way up there. But the flash rate of nitrous, like just how fast it burns when you put nitrous in there, it kind of negates some of that stuff when it comes down to the effective octane, because the burn rate is so fast. If that kind of helps. So, I mean, like I said, you can over octane, you throw in Q16 and ethanol and all this other stuff. If I remember correctly, when I was on the dyno, and actually it's kind of funny because there's a test that the tuning school did, and they put C16, I think it was C16, and they sprayed methanol on top of C16, and it was a pro-charged vet, and it made 1 more horsepower. And C16 is a very high octane fuel. So, like Q16 might be, is kind of a fuel better off just by its own. Abe, I believe you did have a question for me earlier. You had mentioned, and I thought that was a really good question to answer in the live. And I'll just kind of, Abe asked me earlier, and he had asked, what was the difference between difference between open loop and closed loop. So in open loop, you have a set of values each sensor reads, and you have a singular output. So the combination of those sensors put a single output. That output, no matter what, will always be the same when those same conditions are met. So let's say it's 30 pounds of boost, it's 100-degree air charge, inlet air temp, and it will always put out the same amount of fuel. Closed loop means that even though you have those inputs, those values can change. So your output value can change. So a prime example is a wideband sensor at wide open throttle that we used on the Type R. The fuel trims automatically adjust at wide open throttle. That is your closed loop. Another example would be in throttle position control. There are open loop and closed loop. So the open loop throttle control, like perfect examples, idle, means no matter what other conditions are met, like in that same scenario, that throttle plate will always go to the same position. And in a closed loop scenario, that throttle plate will constantly adjust. So that is the difference. A closed loop has the ability to change the calculated output value. Or in the case for just fuel, which most guys look for into, is the ability to just change the output of fuel. So for track use, I add 5 liter, 1.3 gallons of pure laboratory ethanol as octane booster. No E85 in my area. Do you know if it will blend properly and evenly spread? So Enrique, so the laboratory grade stuff of straight ethanol should be just straight ethanol, and it should blend as an ethanol. However, ethanol blends in gasoline, but it doesn't blend right away. It's got to move. So, well, PID is another closed loop and open loop. You can have the PID scenario where, because you say closed loop PID control, you get back to the target value. You can always, like I said, well, the fuel control isn't necessarily all PID. Well, it is, well, yay, nay. Like your PIDs are going to be in your scenarios of throttle, variable wastegate position, things of that nature. So I don't know how you would consider fuel output PID. So I don't know. Maybe you could. I don't know. But either way, same scenario. What kind of problems will I get if I bore my fuel line too big in a high pressure pump line? Well, if you go too big, you can get fuel pulsations in a high pressure pump scenario. That whole thing about fuel going backwards and pressure drops, not really, unless you have a scenario where you get a spike on the pressure sensor due to the fact the bore was so big that it reads it and the PID controls yank down on it because it sees a high number. So you can get poor high pressure pump control. You can hammer the back of the injector shut if you have a very large, and we have to learn this through experience, large bore in the high pressure line and the injector and too much pressure, that injector goes to open, and as it opens, that pressure, that pump hammers the injector partially shut. So that's one of the problems that you can have. So there is such a thing as too big. The only way to negate something like that, where you could have a really big line and not have that issue, would have to be a really big fuel rail. But then if you had a really big fuel rail, it'd be really difficult to build the pressure in a fuel rail in a very rapid RPM increase. What's the highest IAT1 where you really start to lose power on an Fk8? That is variable depending on setup. When you're saying IAT1, they're backwards. And I can go into the tune and set the IAT1 for temp reduction to 0. Or, no, is my brain, sorry, can I do that? Yes, you can do that now. You can set it so that the temperature reduction should be nothing. That's what that secondary air charge chart should be for. So I just don't remember off the top of my head. Well, I don't see PID in Motec either for that kind of fuel. Because if I go into Motec, I go to closed loop, there is, no, because now they can go to, it's fuel P. There's no proportional in the injector in here. Diagnostics. Peak hold time, minimum hold time, reference flow. There's no PID in Motec or fuel. So that's why I say I don't know. Unless it's in the background. I'm well aware of how closely it works. Why anti-lag is bad on your engines compared to other cars. It's bad on every engine. The screen is not. The lighting is messing up the whole. If I turn this way, does it adjust? No, not today. Anti-lag, basically, what you're doing is you're putting the combustion event out the exhaust. And when you do that, that combustion, when the valve's opening, you're actually sending combustion against the valve. So that actually goes and hits the rocker arms. And fuel film is not exactly, no, that's not total output. That's not what I'm talking. All right, I'm not going to get into the whole PID, fuel film, and all that stuff. Really not. This is going to get way too complicated. So back to what I was talking about, the anti-lag. It goes in, and the rocker arm's trying to open. The combustion event's trying to happen against the valve, and you're literally pushing the valve back closed against the rocker arm, which is pushed against the cam, which is pushed against the valve train. So you're pushing back against the springs, get whacked, and want to oscillate because you're pushing the combustion event as it's trying to go down. So if you're literally trying to do this as the combustion event pounds its way out, and then what it does is it puts tension on the cam. The cam wants to stretch the chain. So now you've got the chain, the valve springs, the rocker arms, the valves, the valve guides, and then putting that out the exhaust. All that's happening all at once. Then the other thing is when you load it up, the way that it's loaded on the engine, the engine's not evenly loaded across. You're cutting in and out ignition. So you have this high load scenario where you have an unbalanced engine under a high load with a whole lot of pounding going on. So anti-lag on every car is, yeah. So anti-lag is not the same as pops and bangs on deceleration. Because pops and bangs on deceleration, you don't shut off any cylinders. You're not under a lot of load. You can do some damage to the turbine wheel or the turbo, but not as prevalent. It's really kind of, you have to be really aggressive to dump fuel like that. You can make car do pops and bangs without dumping a lot of fuel. It's just a matter of the ignition event. Even when the fuel overrun on Motec is on, it pops pretty hard. And all that is fuel shut off and turned back on. It just depends on how the system re-engages. And I believe, like I don't know if the factory Fk8, because it doesn't do it. I believe the factory Fk8, when fuel overrun shuts off, I think the ignition cuts too. I'm not 100% on that. But it seems like on Motec, it does cut fuel, but I don't know if it cuts ignition. And whereas when the fuel sprays back in, you get that pop. I don't know 100% if that's exactly. You'd have to literally talk to the people at Motec, because I guarantee nobody else but like Motec knows that. It's like in the firmware, everybody thinks that you can adjust everything in Motec, and you can't. A perfect example of that is if you go to firmware version 17 and 18, the injector advance for the primary tables don't go past all 360 degrees no matter what you do, unless you force the offset through the injection start limit and the injection end limit. But the problem with that is when you have bigger injectors like 2500cc injectors, you can't time them properly to just make regular good power even under less fuel demand scenario. So that everything has limits. Does your top-end tune modify throttle sensitivity and traction control? Traction control is not touched, and traction control PID is a separate tune. It's completely separate. If for those of you who want to tune traction control PID, it's just your standard Honda settings in those tunes. I don't touch anything as far as that goes. Is there a big difference between a 3-inch and 4-inch MAF housing? I was thinking perhaps going on that setup could create lag. No, that's not going to create lag. Actually, the reverse. Anytime you have on, and this goes for the golden rule, on a suction side of a motor, any restriction will cause power drop. It doesn't matter like what you do, or even in a turbo setup. So even though the turbo is being driven by the exhaust, I promise you, it sucks power. So the only disadvantage is maybe you don't need a 4-inch MAF, depending on your setup, to make the maximum amount of power. Let me report that Cybex system is growing. It's had to look past the green text and weird sorting. You know, yeah. If you get used to like any other software, every software is going to have advantages and disadvantages. And one of those things, if you go into the old Motec software, I'm not the older software, I reverted one of my files because I was trying to get the injector advance, and I went to go all the same settings. This just proves that stuff happens in the background you can never see. And I went to go leave the parking lot, and I'm doing 2 miles an hour, and the speedo says 200. I'm like, what is going on here? And I did the file comparison, and there was no difference. And what I had to do was take the scale, and I looked in there, and some of the wheel settings were, instead of 2 meters for diameter, circumference, it was set at 2,000 meters. I'm like, what's going on here? And it turns out the scale is in the background was offset due to a value. So it doesn't matter if it's Motec or Honda. For those of you wondering about what software is the best, every software has its ups and downs. Is the pops and bangs something you can do in your tunes? No, I can't on Honda, because Honda has the fuel decel shut off, overrun shut off. It's just factory shut off. So no matter what, it's going to do it. Like you can make it pop a little bit here and there, but you can't make it like pow, 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 pow. It's just not going to happen. Hey, be nice. Be nice. Be nice. Well, I should run 98 octane. Okay, so you have a 98 RON, which is equal to a 93 here, kind of. Yes, the E50, that's not going to make any difference. Let me go back to the whole. This is a perfect example of how ethanol and having a certain amount of fuel can change something, and there's a limit. If you have 91 octane or 93 octane as your base fuel, and we're out there to make power, once you're above 50% mixed in the ethanol, your base fuel only matters for the flex fuel part of the tune, going back to the 91 octane. Whether you're a 91 and E50 mix blend or 93 and E50 blend, you're not going to get any more ignition timing. You're not going to make any more power. I would not put isopropyl alcohol as an additive. Isopropyl, if I'm correct, quote me on this, means there's water mixed with alcohol. So I wouldn't try it. I don't know if you can. I don't know all the constituents of the fuel. I just know kind of like what's trial and error work. Anti-lag set to 10%. Well, no. Don't turn that off. Turn that off. Please turn it off. You will blow the motor. same as 93 in the US. It's 94 Petro Canada, same as 93 in the United States. Actually, no. It's actually a little bit better, but not much. But it also matters. So I should mention this. It's weird because having 10% ethanol in the fuel can actually help. Like a standard 93 no ethanol fuel versus 93 and 10% might usually make a little bit more power. It's weird. And that comes back down to that effective octane number. It's kind of like 91 and 50% ethanol versus 93 and 50% ethanol. Your actual octane is higher, but your effective octane is the same. But if I were to run nitrous, I'd sooner run it on 93 and E50 than 91 and E50. I understand the standard setting for Honda for anti-lag is 240%. But read what it says under anti-lag. Not for use with stock motor. Turn it off, please. You do not need a clutch for 440 horsepower. A stock clutch holds 450, 460 foot-pounds of torque. Fine. Unless you're really, really hard on the car. The leg press is the FX750. Well, Chase, you have a standard master setup, so and slave setup. And if you don't have the upgraded slave, yes. That and I'll say is if you have, the question actually, Chase, do you have the upgraded master? Or do you have a stock master? Because if you have a stock master, leave the stock master in because the upgraded master is even harder. So, the upgraded master actually throws the clutch even further, and that is the last thing you want on a twin disc. Have you done any tuning with Honda fuel system on a G25 660? I would highly suggest you go back on my Instagram to about 2 years ago, where I made, it's been 2 years. 614 ported head G25 660. On stock cams, like way back when nobody was making that kind of power. I made 550 almost 3 years ago on a 660. Well, way back. So these cars is just, they literally, it's Chase put it best. Well, BBK power, which is Chase. They are my bread and butter. I own one. I built everything off of this, and I just know what works on the car. I don't know what else to say. Like, I've tried everything. I've done, just so we know, I've done stock turbo, G25 660, G3900 with the 83 housing, a 101 housing, stock ported head with Belay cams, ported head with Tier 2 cams, ported head with Tier 3 cams, a G35 1050, Honda, Motec, direct port methanol, pipe charge methanol, 93 octane, Q16. Yeah, I've done it all. Oh, got it. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. He says I switched my YouTube name. So here's the thing with the YouTube and the Instagram. I don't know, man. It just doesn't seem to make a connection. And that's probably because the Instagram isn't run by like Google. So, yeah, that's maybe a point. Andy, I'm curious because you mentioned that you have an FX725 and that's true too, though. There is a break-in period where it does get a bit better. It absolutely does, because in the beginning, man, was it sensitive, mine. My God. You barely touched that. It's like, and that's it. It was engaged. So, The only advantage thing I can say is just make it so the clutch engages closer to the floor and you get more leverage over the length of the swing. I mean, that helps some. That's all I've been able to do. That kind of helps. Okay, so okay, I don't offer an off-the-shelf map for our G25 660 on E50. That's only on stock turbo. That is a custom tune, and if you're running a Honda fuel system, you cannot run 50% ethanol. You have to run less if you want to make the maximum power. Can your Honda line improve the one that comes with Honda FSU upgrade? Yes. Any pressure drop from a 5/64 bore? All right. Well, I'm not going to get. Okay, so I'm not going to get into all the details on how many different lines and sizes I've tried and done. I'm just going to say I know what works with everything. That includes that like different sizes work with 2000. See, each injector has its limits. So they can take, like a stock injector, you can bore the line out as big as you want, and it does not matter. It does not care. A stock injector. But as soon as you change the stock injector, the size of that line matters. And all I can say is the Honda line that comes with the Honda kit does not give you the maximum amount of safe flow without causing other issues. There's room to be had. And that's all. I don't want to, again, because I've spent a lot of money. And honestly, if you really think about this, I've had at least 15 different attempts at making changes to that fuel line out of my own pocket. And no, not every line, not 15 lines, but I spent at least 10 lines figuring out what works. And that's a lot of money to spend. That's $3,000 in just lines and 15 times of in and out of that line. So, what makes it so hard to run fully 85 on a DI car? I know it's a lot to do with the injector open time, but why is it not even possible with 2000cc injectors? Well, it isn't possible. It depends on your power level. If you're running a stock turbo, yeah, we can run fully 85 on stock turbo on 2000cc injectors. But two things. So on these cars, well, the thing is you can't spray during spark. So here's the thing. With a direct injector, you can't spray while the motor is turning the extra 360 degrees. So you don't have 720 degrees of spray time. So here's the thing. A port injector duty cycle is based off of 720 degrees. It's 4-stroke, up, down, up, down. That's 360 degrees of the crank rotation. Up, down, up, down. You can't do that with direct injection. You can't spray during the exhaust stroke and all that stuff, whereas port injection, you can spray, and it just sprays fuel at the back of the valve and gets sucked in when the valve opens. So when you look at a direct injector, you need to look at it as it's half the size because you have half the spray window. So now the open time, you just cut it in half. Now, the worst part is, because you're spraying you can spray and blow the spark out where it won't fire. If you add more ignition timing, your window just gets smaller. You add more RPM, your window gets smaller. So that's the problem. The other thing is, these high pressure pumps, the way they designed it, the lobe runs, it's a 4-lobe pump. How square can you possibly make that thing? Because the GM cars and some other manufacturers use 3 lobes. So it's a triangle. So your triangle, you have a much bigger lift. So that high pressure pump has more range. So now we have a square lobe. So we have this little bitty pumping action. That extra lobe does not make up for the difference in fuel volume. So that's why even on the same high pressure pump, a 3-lobe setup will do better. Now, could we technically design a camshaft to run on Motec that will pump 3 times instead of 4? Yeah. Who's going to do it? No one. So Could you have a custom camshaft made to pump more? Yes, Honda did it. Does it add a lot more? No. Your far better off option is just get a bigger pump. Now, they do make, XDI does make a bigger Evo 60 pump, and I do have the prototype 2500cc injectors. I do think on the 2000cc injectors, you can run full E85 probably to around 550. And then anything after that, it's just not, you're out. You're out. Maybe that range you could do it, but you're gonna have to run it lean. You're gonna have to lean it out. And on the bigger injectors, I kind of don't like doing that because the spray pattern's not as good. I actually run the bigger 2000s fairly a significant amount richer. So I hope that kind of clarifies why you can't run, E85 on a DI car. You just don't have. If we made, what would be awesome is if somebody came up with, remove the vacuum pump and get a belt-driven high pressure, not a belt-driven, the other style high pressure pump driven off the cam the other way. That would solve all the problems. That, and you would, could I use the same cam? Probably, yeah, I think you could use the same camshaft and still do it. I upgraded to a 660. Is it worth going to flex fuel ethanol blend or just stick to 98? It's absolutely worth doing ethanol blend. So on a Honda fuel system, the difference in power is 40 to 50 wheel horsepower. Those 2300. You mean 2500? Oh yeah. Okay, so I should say this. The 2500cc injectors definitely require some injector timing changes significantly through the entire injector phase chart. The problem is because they spray so fast, well, not so fast, but they spray so much in such a short amount of time. You're spraying it out the exhaust, and then it actually burns as it goes out the exhaust. So your actual air fuel ratio is not the same. So you get black smoke because some of the fuel is kind of being ignited on the way out, residual. So believe it or not, it's kind of like backwards to the school of thought. I actually had to spray later down low and earlier up top. They just don't scale out the same. They're not the rate of spray at low spray, and it's going to be because the amount how fast that pintle opens and closes. When you only open a little bit because you have such a big amount of area there, you're going to get, normally you would get less fuel and it wouldn't come out as fast when it does because the way they modify them. So the best middle of the road, honestly, I think is the 2000cc injectors, because either way, I don't have a pump big enough to really maximize the use of 2500s. The second fuel rail with Honda. You can run secondary fuel rail with a split second controller on Honda. People do it. People definitely already do it. You just get the radium rail and get a split second controller, wire it in, but I'll tell you, I don't recommend doing a split second controller if you really after really big power. Not for big power. I don't recommend you do it on the deadhead. I don't think it's worth it. You're better off going and putting a methanol kit on the car. For the Accord guys, it's worth it. The way their ECU calculates boost is just, it's different. Is there any advantage of running a hood exit with the R660 other than hot boy points? I don't know. I don't think so. And I'll tell you why. And I think this will kind of clarify, where does a hood exit have its place? Before I switched over to the Motec, I was having a very difficult time making less than 30 pounds of boost above 7,000 RPM on the G35 1050. And I said, yeah, I'll get onto that spool part too about can it spool faster. It's still so I had the hood exit and I reconnected the exhaust. It still wanted to make 30 pounds above 7,000 RPM on the tier 3 cams. So then I went back from the belay throttle body to the stock throttle body, and it still wanted to make no less than 30 pounds above 7,000 RPM. However, it did start to kind of taper over just a little. So with that being said, with a 3-inch exhaust, unless you're after 675 or more, might not be worth it. Just might not be worth the headache. I'll say this though, because of the location, it just stink your face up. Oh, it's just smelly. So the other thing is, try finding a flange that they use. What is the maximum safe horsepower and newton meter for stock motor? Well, I can tell you, I've already made 620 on a stock bottom end. And the motor's in one piece. The transmission, not so much. And as torque, I'm sorry, but I don't have the newton meter equivalent of 430 foot-pounds. 650 horsepower on stock motor. Well, I don't know if there's anybody that's actually at 650 and can show a dyno graph for it on stock bottom end. I know that I have a car, I have a dyno graph, and I tuned it, and I have a graph showing the whole graph and the actual video of it cracking off 620. So I just can't answer you if I've seen anything bigger than that. So ideal compression ratio when building a K20C1. Oh, that's tricky. So higher compression will help you spool. However, there's a limit where when you have a domed piston and you ignite the fuel, that fuel has to go around the dome. So the higher the compression doesn't always make more power, but a higher compression will absolutely spool earlier. Now, in an NE motor, you might even find, oddly enough, when you get to a really high compression, you might even end up with more ignition timing because you're trying to get that to burn around the dome of the piston. So honestly, and from what Luke has said, generally the bigger power motors are between 9.5 and 10.5 to 1 and no more. And that there isn't always a benefit even going to 10.5 to 1. And as far as making max power on stock, 650 newton meters is too much for stock bottom end. 430 foot-pounds of torque is the max, and do not make that below 4,500 RPM. The problem that I think we run into with the Fk8 is the RPM on the stock bottom end, and it's not so much the fact because you can always tame the torque, but the problem is in the really high RPM, those stock rod bolts, you got to pull that piston back down in the high RPM. And that snatch load can rip the rod bolts apart or stretch them, and then you have bearing play and the motor goes bye-bye. Yeah, we can, well, you need cams. If you want to make over 600 on a stock motor, you need cams and springs, retainers, and that's just a must. Don't go thinking that it'll survive any other way. Hey, what's up, Pooler 1130? So flex fuel and fuel system, 0. Should I go turbo after full bolt on, or is there any supporting mods needed before doing a turbo upgrade? Yes, at least the fuel system, at the very least, and flex fuel is the second thing. 430 foot-pounds of torque at the wheels is what I keep most of my cars to. What's the amount of ethanol the Honda FSU, which Honda pump is maxed out? And you would generally, somewhere around E40 is what we see on the Honda fuel pump. Now, cams, ported head, all that stuff changes all that. So, like, that's not even, like, a perfect example is on 93 octane on cams on a G30, make 548 on my injectors on 93 octane. But going to 40% ethanol only makes 568. So there's give and take there. It just really depends. It probably would have been better to run 30% ethanol with the cams. So you got to take that with a grain of salt. Like, also, if you have like a restrictive setup, more ethanol is going to help you. If you have a really high flowing setup, more ethanol can hurt you. Still, a bigger turbo, always fuel system. You're going to be capped at 420-ish horsepower on a big turbo. Either way, on stock fuel system, and I don't recommend stretching this fuel system that hard. Even though I'm fairly aggressive on my fuel system with the tunes, I still leave room. What's up, Juan? What should be the max fuel percentage at 8,000 RPM with the upgraded fuel pump? That's a loaded question, Juan. You got a lot. What do you mean max fuel pump percentage at 8,000 with the upgraded fuel pump? That's for what setup? So I'll say this. Generally, when you start getting over 88% fuel pump duty cycle, you start to lose control of the pump. And on some pumps, 80%, you start to lose control. Holy crap, the time went by quick today. Recipe for 500 little horsepower. If you're trying to do it on 94 octane or 93 octane, you're gonna make like 480 on a big turbo setup with a fuel system. But if you want to make more than like 480, you're gonna need cams. Well, one isn't going to 8,000. He's asking. I think he's asking because of upgrade. No, wait. One, are you on? Oh God, I'm sorry, guys. I get everybody crossed up because I got more than one Juan that I talk to. I got Juan Luis and Juan Nunez. Well, yeah. So then you're fine. I mean, again, got to realize the longevity of components when pushed to a certain point. Longevity of P600 versus MHI or R660. Well, P600 and longevity, I don't really put in the same statement. However, the only one that I've ever seen blow up that I've tuned on a P600 is one that had back pressure issues in the exhaust. So I don't know. It depends on, you got to learn when people are tuning these cars, they got to realize a turbo is happy in a certain area. So Kai, you got to remember, full bolt on isn't just full bolt on, or Akira, Nabia. Full bolt on isn't just full bolt on, because a PRL intercooler doesn't do anywhere near as good as a Mishimoto. But I think maybe with a G25 660, a Mishimoto intercooler, upper 400s, like 490 on 93, 94 octane. So How you can control torque. I've seen Fk8 make 600 horsepower and 400 torque, 500 horsepower and 400 torque. I know the ECU is tuned based on torque and versus boost pressure. One, I don't actually use the torque request to control that. I do that with boost, timing, and fuel. Another one. I got 1, 2, 3 ones. I always. Here we go. I always tune them through boost and ignition timing control. Boost, ignition timing, and a general amount of fuel. That's how I decide like how much as far as torque output. I don't use the torque request. Actually, when I tune them, I don't use the torque request. The only thing I use the torque request is for like lower gears. That's about it. Turbo is happening in a certain area for the P600. That area is garbage. Ouch. So the P600, due to the nature of the small hot side and the fact that it doesn't really spool, it doesn't really, they say it spools great, but the RV6 is a bigger hot side and spools earlier. The P600, due to the restrictive nature on the hot side, absolutely chokes out at higher boost. Anything above 27 PSI in a P600 on a stock motor starts to choke above 6,800. And it will roll over hard when you start throwing boost at it up there. How is my workload this time of year? So, as far as this business, it's been very different for me. I'm doing really well, and I know a lot of people are not doing well. This store business, I've opened this up literally April 1st of 2020. Well, is it April? Yeah, April 1st. No, what do they consider the 31st? Yeah, April 31st, 2021, I got my resale license to start the business. This is only, if you want to get technical, this is literally, I'm barely over 2 years of business and I'm slammed right now. So I need to hire somebody. Problem is, there's nobody close enough that wants to work or has the skill set, even if they want to work. Can somebody, yeah, Juan, yeah. See, it's funny, Juan, you say that though. Like, I have my charge pipes and I wanted to, I don't have the coupler for the cold side, for the hot side. And that's all it is a coupler on the hot side. But I do have the charge pipe on the cold side for the Mishimoto. It's still there. Oh, thank you for the compliments, man. But does Peppo make up his numbers? I'm not going to get into that. I'm just going to leave that subject alone. Because I'm going to say this and then I'll leave this subject alone. At one point, I seen them claim 500 and something foot-pounds of torque on a stock clutch. And I think it was stock motor too. And I don't care what you say. There is no way. The motor might live for a few pulls or whatever, but there is no way that clutch survives 500 foot-pounds of torque, a stock clutch. And that's all I'm going to say. And I'll say this also. Originally, they had a car that was a little GTX, old GT, not even a GTX, it was a GT turbo. I think it was GT 2860 or something. Rated at 500 horsepower at the crank, an older Garrett with a 200 shot of nitrous making 800 horsepower. So 200 shot of nitrous, a 500 horsepower turbo makes 800 at the wheels. So that's all I'm going to say. It started to smoke on me. Peppo put 33 pounds of boost on it. I do not put more than 32 as a peak on the P600, and I do not run them out past 7,400 RPM and over 6,800. Generally, I start turning the boost down because the turbo just doesn't like it. Yeah, well, okay. I thank you for the compliment saying about the best at tuning the car in the world, but until I learn Motec as a whole with the car, and until I learn the Motec to tune the sequential and a couple other things, I can't honestly say I'm the best by any means. You can do a live dyno tune, but so I'm just gonna say something. D-Rob, he has a following, but I swear he doesn't like the Type R. I would swear D-Rob doesn't like the Type R because he did one that had cams and a full fuel system, and I mean like 460 or 4 something like that. I swear, because he sends the Accords to the moon, and I just really think he doesn't like the Type R. Or maybe the best on Honda. D-Rob doesn't like a lot of people, man. He's just kind of he's a yeah. I'll leave him alone. So I don't mind. I think I have, to be honest with you, pushed the limits on Honda. I think I may actually just finally be at the limit. And the reason I say this is I wanted to kind of do that G35 1050. And what I realized was two things. I'm on tier 3 cam, so my car is going to want to make more power above 8,000 than it did before. Two, the bigger turbo is going to naturally push that power later anyway. And what I found was even on a very high air charge, the ECU was just pulling back. And it couldn't really control boost. The throttle plate constantly wanted to close above 7,500. And I think maybe on a G3900, maybe could crack 800 wheel horsepower without nitrous. But I'm just at a point, it's just not worth, like, I don't think it's worth it going that crazy. But 700 wheel horsepower, 750 wheel horsepower without nitrous is absolutely possible on Honda. And I can do that safely. But going for more than that really isn't really, I don't really recommend it at this time. Yes, I know Peppo has some quarter mile times tuned by him, but that's all his people do. A lot of, and they don't, honestly, there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes. They don't care if they blow up. They just put another motor in it and they don't tell anybody. So. Well, the thing, Pooler, the K20 in the car is a K20C4. He's the only one who do 500 on an Accord. No, I broke 506 before he did on Honda. Mm. 506 on the Corey's car is legit. P600 ported head Honda port injection. No problem. What is the limit when you say pulls it back? I don't know what you. I just don't think he cares to push the Type R. Another thing, I should make this very clear too. Like, there was a big misconception about the part number. Why the Accord supposedly came with better rods than the Type R, and I can tell you what happened. After a lot of research, what happened was the Accord came out, and since the Accord has a different part labeling catalog, They took the part number for the connecting rod and changed it because they put it in the Accord. And the connecting rod never actually changed. So the Accords do not come with a better connecting rod. It's the same connecting rod. The difference is people are blowing them up more on the Type R simply because you can make more power on the Type R, on stock clutch and stock components. There's more room. Fuel systems were capable. So that's why they broke. Well, port injection is definitely possible on a Type R. You just got to use a split-second controller, but it's just not worth the squeeze. You're just better off running methanol. I don't think the Honda that made the K20C1 overcomplicated for. I think so. Oh, Honda made for tuning purposes. No. And I'll explain why. This is the first go at Honda making a turbocharged car, and they used an electronic gate. And the Bosch Med 17 has been used since the 6th generation Volkswagen GTI. So we're on our MK8 GTI. The MK6 GTI actually had a Med 17. The Focus RS had a Med 17. Land Rovers used the same ECU. And it was a proven ECU to control air charge. So they went with a proven system. Oh, yeah. Oh, I know. He doesn't. I don't know. He did one with cams. I got a phone call. I was going to say I got a phone call from someone in the industry because of a customer contacting about cams with them on the dyno. That's all I'm going to say. They got a phone call with a whole lot of questions that were asked, being back and forth. And I don't know. For whatever reason, he is just either not comfortable with the Type R or doesn't care for Honda. He's made it very clear, very, very clear that he does not like Honda. D-Rob made it very clear he does not like them. So he said to me in one time, and I was just trying to be polite, that I like to do the Accords better on Honda. I don't like doing them on K-Tuner. I like the features in Honda better. This was a long time ago. He said, don't do anything. Don't suck Honda's DICK. They won't do shit for you. That is what D-Rob said. So when he said that, I just went, I'm not dealing with this. Block. So again, so maybe that's why he will never push a Type R. I don't know. Maybe he's not comfortable with it. I don't know. Maybe he's not comfortable with the software. I just can't answer you on that. Why he does that. So actually, the Bosch Med 17.3, if you go look, the Focus RS actually should be the same ECU. I'm pretty sure it's also a Bosch Med 17.3. It's just the later generations. And all the Bosch Med 17s. Yeah. Sorry. Wait. It's a 17.2. It's really not really much different. So the thing that I liked about them, and I can tell you it can be uploaded faster, but just the thing is Honda needs to make their modules usable for all the cars. Andy, I understand what you're saying about the Fk8s and 17s having different rods, but the problem is I've got the 17 making 620 wheel horsepower and 440 foot-pounds of torque. It's a part number. There's literally no difference. There's no casting material difference. There's literally no difference. That was a huge debate out there, and I've seen 17 rods, 18 rods, 19 rods. They're identical. They're literally identical. I hear Honda support isn't great compared to other platforms. Do you have personal experience with this? I don't know what you mean about as far as support, as far as software goes. They try to make things easier on the tuner by giving you mod buttons. However, I think sometimes this comes to a detriment because this blocks us from making other adjustments. No, I have not bent any rods. The problem, like literally, I don't know, like here's the thing. Like a perfect example is there is an RPM limit and multiple points in the ECU. So they give you a mod button instead. The thing is, the same thing goes with Motec. So open up Motec. There's multiple places for an RPM limit. And they do this for features. And I think there might be, like perfect example, there might be an RPM limit based upon the mode the car's in. So I don't know because they put that in the background. And it would be nice, like if they just turned around and just put, you know, like engine speed section. Please don't bring up their name. I don't really give a fuck about JSR. They can say all the shit they want. I tuned his car, so I don't know what the fuck he's talking about anyway. My air car would smoke my car, but I tuned his shit. He's never put it back on the... Hold on. JSR's car is going to smoke my shit. Unless you're talking about somebody else. I don't even know. I don't. Let's not bring them up, please. Are Honda base maps safe in the long term, or a custom tune is better? A custom tune is always going to be better for your application. The problem is they're generalized, and sometimes they're done originally on a certain equipment on a car, and the problem is different intercoolers and different downpipes have different thresholds for response. So comparing EGT reduction, pump 93 versus E30 versus E40 versus E50. Here's the problem, okay? And an EGT, it's not actually, there's no sensor. It's a calculated EGT, so it doesn't matter what fuel you're running. And without seeing the exact method that an ECU calculates an EGT, the way the factory came upon that. So cam timing is one. More overlap equals a higher EGT. However, outside of that, and retarded ignition timing, less ignition timing. However, again, they may actually calculate it on cam overlap and general load on the motor, which higher ignition timing equals more load, which can still equal more EGT depending on the scenario. So you can't really say that. The problem is until you understand how the ECU is getting to that calculated EGT, and unless you ask a Honda software engineer, you don't know. I know you're on a built motor. Did your stock motor let go? No, it didn't let go. My turbo went bad. So I just said, fuck it, rip the motor out while I wait for get a new turbo. I just said it was time. JSR is never going to go to quarter mile because nobody can drive over there. Jake actually can drive, but his kid drives better. I swear to God, his kid drives better. And the reason their car never went down the quarter mile because when they stepped in the clutch, it was throwing. So when they go to start the car, it was throwing a cam crank correlation code. I said, there is a problem. And he said, can you just delete the code? I'm like, bro, you have a problem. You need to go into the timing system. Something happened. We're getting a timing correlation code, not some random code. Like, you don't just go delete the codes. So they went to the track. And what was happening was, my guess is they didn't adjust the clutch right. They claimed it on twin disc clutch cold starts, but the car didn't have any miles on it. Is that it actually wore out the thrust washer and kicked the thrust washer out the other side and shoved it up underneath the piston. And I told them, there is a mechanical problem. You need to fix it. And his answer was always, can you please delete the codes? So again, I'm going to make a t-shirt that says, blame the tuner. I swear to God, I'm going to make a t-shirt that says, blame the tuner. Because when you can't figure it out because you did the install wrong, blame the tuner. What is the ideal wastegate open millimeter position under what I'm doing a typical drop-in turbo pushing 28 to 30 PSI? Again, another loaded question. That's an impossible question to answer because many drop-in turbos at that boost pressure, depending on the car, you could have a back pressure issue in the exhaust and the wastegate will be slammed shut at that point. And you're just beating on everything. You could have the turbo's too small for a cam motor and somebody's trying to rev to 8,000 RPM. You could have, too much back pressure like a P600 and the wastegate will be open even though you're not doing any good. You can't really go by that. You can't go by that. It needs to be more open than 2 millimeter for sure. Yes. But there's no ideal wastegate open position. And the reason I say this because on a G30 770, that son of a bitch is closed. Because you're not moving a lot of air on a stock motor. Whereas my motor, fuck man, on a G30 900, that shit is wide open up high. So it kind of can't. Does Belay cams make a regrind cams or cam? Does BC make a regrind or cams for the Fk8? No. And Belay's cams are reground. Yeah, man. Just delete the codes. Yes, it is. And yeah, I like big boost and I cannot lie. I got another one of his shirts recently. Dare to keep engines off nitrous. And the other one I got is boost. It either fixes everything or it breaks everything. Andy, do me a favor, Andy. Can you please? I don't know where it is on the Instagram or what happened, but I was looking for you. Andy, what's your IG name? Because I can't find you for some reason, and I knew I had you on here. Yeah, the SMX car is a wild. Which upgrade clutch is the closest to stock feeling? I think like the base FX 400. It was in here. I just remember it was. Nope. I don't know what happened, man. Honestly, dude, I don't remember doing all that, and I'm sorry. I do. In that case, I owe you an apology. And I don't mind saying that. I'm in the wrong. Well, I'm sure your screen name. I just got to pull it up, put you back in there. I don't know how to. I'm horrible with this shit. Mm. I don't know how to search for any one person to. Like you said, I'm horrible with this online shit, guys. Honestly. Well, do me a favor. Like, what is your screen name? Because I don't. It's the only way I'm gonna be able to figure out how to unblock somebody is to find their screen name, put it back in. What's the wait time on live data tune right now with you? I want to have my tune finished to enjoy. D-Rob is taking 5 to 7 days to send me a revision back. I usually it's about 2 weeks. Ouch. Privacy, scroll down. So settings, privacy. Oh, settings and privacy. Okay. Settings, privacy, scroll down. Blocked accounts. Where it blocked? Where are you? Block. I don't care. Yeah. Okay. There. Fixed. Thank you, Andy. And thank you for being. I say you're the better man in this scenario. You definitely are. So, thank you. So, oh, you know what? It's almost time though. So, yeah, he likes the Accord, man. He does. He definitely does. So, um, what was I gonna say? Oh, I'm going to share something because I'm probably not going to do it. And this will help you guys. So, Andy, you're going to like this one. I know you're going to know what I'm going to talk about here. In the bottom of your basket, you know how the Type R has the Venturi on the outside, Andy, right? But in the bottom of your basket, you have that Venturi connection, that blue piece, that post that sticks up. You're going to love this one I'm about to tell you. Thank you, sir. Take a methanol straight nozzle holder onto that blue piece and twist it down, and it locks on. And what you can do is, if you're running AN fittings inside there, is you can run a T with an NPT fitting and have the factory Accord Venturi function so that it pulls fuel in the basket from the bottom. So I figured you'd like that, and I don't mind sharing, because to be honest with you, that's not something for me that I really, I just have too much workload, and I just can't do it, man. And since you're doing the Accords, I don't mind. I just did that for a customer. So just that blue post that sticks out that's this color, but inside, just take your standard methanol NPT fitting, wind that sucker down on there, put an NPT with a little, I think it was 5/32 I used, and just put a T in your fittings in there, and you can just pressurize that, and you will have the factory Venturi functioning. So, I hope that works for you, man, because you really are trying to go gung-ho in the Accord, man. You have a big advantage with the Accords because you have a manual. So you can kind of really push some of the stuff that you can't do. What I do need to know, and this is something I thought might be interesting to look into, and generally on K-Tuner, you can make more torque earlier. Hold on. Oh, there we go. Follow. I just put follow. Yeah, man. That's so I was trying back to what I was saying. The one thing I want to try to figure out, I need a car that's on Honda that's in an automatic that is a 4-bar that wants to do 4-bar map sensors. I want to see if now that Honda has unlocked the 4-bar map sensor, can I put more boost in it earlier to create more torque, or there's another chart in there to see if I can help you with that, Andy. Some info on that. I'll talk to you after I get off the live. And to see if I can play with another table. There is an offset boost table to see if I can change the table to make more boost at lower RPM. So obviously this will be my time involved, and it's whatever, I don't mind. So that's on me. So, but listen, guys, it's already 9:40. I've had enough coffee to get through the day, and I gotta walk my pup. And yeah, and thank you everybody, man. Great week as always. Every time, well, I know we always pick a subject to start, but if you guys have any ideas for next week, throw me a message, and see what we'll see what sticks, see what I can make a topic out of. Don't tell me now, because I'll be damned if I remember 4 days from now. Send it in a regular message, just not on here. And something that hopefully, even if I've kind of touched on the subject, maybe it's something that we can kind of like do like a side subject. And so like if we just did like what makes 500 horsepower, why is a drop-in turbo, and what's a better drop-in turbo instead, even though like maybe it was part of 500 horsepower. So, but that's pretty much it, guys. I'm gonna call it a night. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I love y'all, and I'll see you next week, same time, same channel. Always, everybody.